Well, we met at childcare when childcare was a Aboriginal and Islander childcare fostering and adoption organisation. Back in the 80s.
1982, we met in October.
Yeah, but it had been going for a while, for a couple of years. Started off being a 2-man, 3-man setup from the medical centre. There was a breakaway group, and it was all arguing. They didn't want to. They wanted to keep control and so on. But the person at the time, Raylene
Burns.
Burns, I think it was Bugden or Burns. Yeah. Anyway, she was, very keen to be independent, and gradually she after a while left, but gradually it just built itself. But we built it up. We had a really good board, and slowly started to put more and more people on, and working with the Department of Child Services, I think it was at the time. And wanting to be in charge of our own Aboriginal people, in charge of our own affairs as far as well-being of families, children, young people goes. And at that time, we were putting on people. I can't remember the exact date, but you just said it, I think.
Yeah, I was a trainee. I came in as a trainee.
1982?
1982. I did voluntary work until January.
Yes. Oh, really? Yeah.
And then you put me on in January.
You'll have to remind me of all this stuff because I can't remember.
A 12-month traineeship where I did 4 months of welfare and family support. And then I did community development.
Yeah. You were working with young people too.
And research and youth work.
And youth work, that's right.
Yeah. I worked a lot with the street kids.
With the street kids. Yeah. And I know we were all, everyone bored and everyone was very impressed with your work with that, at that time, because they were tough, really tough kids,
Yeah, they were.
They really were. They were homeless, but they weren't really homeless. They all had families somewhere, but they didn't get on with them. They argued or were kicked out or something like that. But they always had somebody else to go to. Do you remember Auntie? Oh, was it? I forget that older Aboriginal lady at the time. She would take in all these kids, Murray kids, and sometimes
Annie Carmen.
No, I think it was her, but someone else too. I can't remember her name. Isn't it awful? But she would take in Murray kids, but the Murray kids would bring along white kids who were also kicked out. Yeah. But they really were homeless. They were kicked out and not allowed. Couldn't go anywhere else really.
Yeah, our kids always extended that care. Yeah, that was the thing.
Yeah. I remember she was telling us a story about the Murray kids came there, and they kept this white kid outside. They said, "Oh, we found this kid, this other kid under the bridge. He'd been sleeping there for a while. He'd been kicked out and so. Can he come in too? They kept, and then of course it was all right. They brought him in, and I thought that just struck me as being really, very much the way of Murray families.
Yeah.
That inclusion rather than exclusion. No matter what they've done or anything like that,
and that sense of responsibility for each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and that everybody had a place really, even if all right, this kid or that kid was fighting with their family. You can always go to Uncle so and so or Auntie so and so, and they might take you in. They might tell you off at the same time. Tell you what's good for you, but they'll take them in.
But outside of bloodlines, just being able to go to people who were given, titles of respect of auntie and uncle, but weren't blood connected, but you knew you could always go there.
Yeah, right.
Everyone could go there and that. And particularly, a lot of our elderly women, our aunties and that who took people in, didn't matter who.
Yes.
But it's, that's just that responsibility of being a woman in our cultures.
Yeah. Look after everyone.
Everyone.
And be tough with it too. Not how do you call it? Easily conned.
No.
Very aware, very smart, very aware. But would fight like mad against the police, against the welfare. Stand up. And
that
really be
total.
A champion for that family, these kids, and so on. Gee, I was just incredibly impressed with that. I mean, I grew up with that sort of thing, close family and so on. but it really does seem to be a part of the cultural makeup, you know.
It does.
Strong Murray women, you know.
Yeah.
And I learned so much through childcare too, through other Aboriginal people, through my own family, like you with your family, I guess, too, you know.
Yeah.
About that it wasn't just, how do you put it, an accidental or incidental thing. It was actually a structure of equality or balance with men, you know, strong Murray women allied with strong Murray men, but separate, but equal or and in balance, you know. And I remember my mother like that. I know your mother's like that, but my mother too. Would, you know, she's just really tough, you know, but beautiful with it. You know, loves singing and all that kind of stuff.
It really was that you know, the kid glove in the iron fist.
Yeah, right.
You know? Yeah. Because Aboriginal women have always had to be strong, because our roles are very equitable with men. Yeah. No one role or one gender is more important than the other.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I guess, you know, that only there are assumptions that have been made or stereotypes that have been made simply because those who came and recorded our history were white Anglo-Saxon anthropologists who weren't privy to women's business and sharing.
No.
And because they were showing the men's, they took it from their own cultural
the men ran
prerogatives that, you know, and values that the men must be must be the boss, their business is exactly. It's more important.
Of course.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Exactly.
And of course the one who I can't think of her name, a woman anthropologist. Oh, she's a friend of Lilla's, actually, of Lilla Watson. Until she came along, you know, the standing of women and the power of women weren't even known. She started to write, meeting with Aboriginal women, talking, different communities and so on, and she explained a whole range of things about family makeup, family structures, political structure, and really understood and everybody who read that, you know, understood for the first time exactly how Aboriginal women are.
Yeah.
You know,
well, our roles underpinned, you know, the whole society. You know, if you're looking back long ago, the men went out and hunted for, you know, the kangaroo or the emu or big big animals. But if they weren't successful in the hunt that day, it was the women who went out and dug for the lizards and the eggs and gathered the roots, and who then taught the children at their side. Whilst doing that, they were the ones who sustained.
Actually, the bulk of it
that society
was done by that, from what I understand. You know, because quite often, I mean, traditionally, they brought in the food most of the time when, I don't know, conditions weren't right, or I don't know, a drought was on, or something. You know, something was going on. But I think with colonialism, when that happened, as it did all around the world, Indigenous men, native men in many cultures, I think, they just became like emasculated because their own power wasn't recognised or taken away from them. But women, as it is everywhere, all over the world, of course, you know, women's role, it just carries on. They look after everyone, look after children, get food, you know, and so on. I think it just comes.
Plus, it's the men they remove. You know, in many cases, they took our men away. They sent them away to differing country, you know, within Australia, and so women were left, you know, to hold that clan group, or you know,
hold it all together. Really, that's what they did, you know. And I think there must have been, I think over the centuries, I think there must have been enormous sort of like cultural, social, psychological damage done to men. I think with you know, they're still trying to come to terms with. Like I can imagine a lot of Maori men in some areas, not so much say the Northern Territory, I guess, where there was like cattle sort of industries and all that, but ring barking trees, you know, clearing land by ring barking trees. I often wondered how that went down with men. Do you know what I mean? With Aboriginal men, because the whole point is, of course, looking after land, and here they are trying to earn a living, basically, or get resources of some sort from doing that kind of work for you know, white people, white settlers or farmers or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was still going on right up until the 50s, 60s, I think, had been going on for about 100 years or something here, especially in places like the Gold Coast, all along coastal areas where urbanisation sort of happened quickly and at a, what do you call it, like a juggernaut, like it just rolled in and just took over, a whole load of things. Yeah. So... Yeah. I don't know. I just wonder sometimes how the strength of women. I reckon women anywhere, all over the world, all cultures, everybody, no matter what country they come from, they are really, really tough. They're fearless. They're fearless. I was saying before, telling these fellas, the sun is female, in Aboriginal stuff. The sun is female and the moon is male. That's what I've been told and sort of kind of informed a whole lot of places, but I thought that's not surprising, to be, because I see Maori women like that as fearless, just absolutely fearless. I saw my mother and various aunties like that. I don't think I've ever, even though I know there were lots of family dysfunction elsewhere, I've heard about and so on, and there was a bit of some family dysfunction here. But the women always seem to be like, not browbeaten at all, really, fight back. And fight like men, actually, too, but very strong character, very strong character, really.
Very resilient,
Very resilient.
Just
very
a naturally ingrained resilience that I guess, is formulated from years of living in a land where, and in societies where your role is affirmed and you have a very strong place and sense of place within yourself. When you were saying about the men, I often sort of think how, disparaging it must have felt for them when, we have these wise, strong men, whom in our family groups and our clan groups and that were held up with such great respect, and then they're given these menial tasks to do, these jobs, and being referred to as boy, and having that manhood, their very manhood being robbed from them by non-Indigenous people. It's no wonder that our men had such struggles to hold on to themselves, being ripped away from family.
And so, in a way, I'm not excusing or making a light of or something, the reasons why for families dysfunction, but if a man's honour is what do you say, just damaged, that's what they'll do. I mean, they'll look further for destructive behaviour, self-destructive behaviour, either grog or violence or something like that. Well, I'm not making a mistake. I'm not making an excuse for it, but I'm sure in those earlier days, that's exactly what happened, because they couldn't do anything. But women, women just carried on. I mean they were at the butt end of it sometimes, quite often. But especially from my own place down here, there was sort of a big change especially between the wars, between the First World War and the Second World War, where more women, Aboriginal cousins, married white fellas, and settled for a particular kind of life, where in their view, I think they thought, well, they opted for security, really security outside of the cultural things of almost like an arranged marriage, which was sort of still in place, say before and during the First World War.
So they were protected from being under the Act.
Yeah. Well, here, definitely here they were.
Which I don't know if we've actually talked about the Aborigines Protection Act, have we?
No.
And how all-encompassing it was, particularly here in Queensland.
Oh, absolutely.
Where under the main auspices of the acts, we went from disposition and disposal.
Yes.
To to smoothing, you know, the pillow of a dying race. And when that didn't happen,
yes.
you know, it was about integration and then assimilation.
Assimilation,
you know, becoming like white people, and that's where,
joining the system,
pardon me, how they justified having children being removed who had non-Indigenous ancestry or bloodlines, because it was believed in government that by taking these children away from their families and bringing them up to be acceptable in white society, that eventually they would marry white, their children would marry white, and they would breed the colour out of us.
Yes, I think that was the hope.
It was the hope, but it was mentioned in parliamentary recordings. If you look at the votes and proceedings of Queensland Parliament, you know, it is all mentioned, you know, in a lot of those. But the Director of Native Affairs, right up until the 1970s, late 1970s, had such control over Aboriginal people. He controlled your wages, he controlled where you lived. At his whim or fancy, he could send you anywhere in the state. You didn't own your own possessions.
No, I know this is going sort of far out. I mean, it's not written anywhere, but in a way, it was sort of like almost like having a power of life and death over someone.
They did.
You know, they really did.
They did. They did. So I think one of the things that I'm finding most exciting about being involved in this project, besides, you know, the impact that can flow on for us here, it is also the contact and connections that we're making with other women, you know, such as Vic and Fiona, you know, just how strong that we as women, as mothers,
mothers and sisters, daughters, grandmothers, aunts. The sharing of those experiences, and what we've found over the years, you know, in our work, within our family, between other families, of course, as mixing, you know, intermarrying and so on and so on. But when we do get together and establish, well, we've established this relationship now, but we've when we come to sort of actually, well, talking, discussing, planning.
When we embed that connection, you know, very soundly.
Really looking forward to that.
There's going to be so many wonderfully strong and positive sharings that will come.
Because they are such strong, they're obviously such strong women, really strong. And I'm so looking forward to working with both on, from my point of view and your point of view, you know, I mean, our particular perspective areas in community development and education,
and for me, for, you know, education particularly, and child, you know, welfare, women's, you know, women's issues as far as health goes and things like that.